Fragments of Him. So this is an indie game addressing some heavy topics. The promotional materials for it made me think of That Dragon Cancer, which I thought was really effective, and so I'm curious to see how this game works out. Loading. Yeah, it's about mourning. It's about, well, I get the sense that it's about the loss of, well, the game is called Fragments of Him. I assume it's about the loss of some male family member or friend. Again, I'm scanting the details. I kind of wanted to see the game fresh, you know, not really know too much about it going in. Oh, interesting. I can... Oh, the left mouse button moves me forward when it isn't interacting with something. So I might be able to play with just the mouse. Follow him into that door.
I love you. Have a good day. So many memories, and I've not taken the time to think about how much they mean to me. It's time for a change. I should have looked at this view more. I'll do that from now on.
Can't go back in there.
The little things matter. Take this elevator button. Someone made it look that way, and I never even thought about it once.
Huh. So this looks like I could have chosen to go with him down the stairs, but instead I chose the elevator.
There are so many things I've never really looked at. Things that work perfectly, but I just ignore.
Drax, we don't know anything about the fields
doing
yet.
the
We'll
same
find out.
thing every day.
Certainly I like the art style. It's very sort of monochromatic
It feels like I'm locked in.
thing they've got going on. Hey, X-Rogan.
I'm going to change things.
I wonder if I do pause the game, if I'll start getting a different hint on the loading screen.
It feels like I drifted into these routines.
Clearly an English game. I'm trying to decide if I think I'm this man or if I'm a friend of this man. Yeah,
Some of the
definitely
patterns
do
are
that.
worth keeping. But, I don't know. We're getting lazy. I don't want that.
Azumi, we haven't talked about the question of whether Gurubani can be made available in State of Decay for people who never bought the original game. I'll mention
I should have
it.
paid more attention to the small stuff.
It's
Not
not
on
an
to
easy
avoiding
thing,
everything
though,
that
to
matters.
necessarily make happen. It's set up a certain way, and I'm not sure how easy it would be to set it up another way, especially this long after release. But I'll certainly bring it up.
I've let myself lose track of what I want after everything we've been through.
Wow, they really built a lot of city.
I'll tell him tonight. I love that cafe. On warm evenings, sometimes I sit there with a glass of wine, waiting to catch Harry on his way back from work.
It'd be funny if we found out that this guy was just stalking Harry.
We used to walk in the park together. We should do more of that. He's got to know how I feel about him. I love him so much.
Wait, what? Oh, crap. Thought something like that might happen. I couldn't tell whether to expect that the person I was with would be the victim, or... Wait, no, it seems like I'm here.
Patterns. The same start again. The same alarm tone that Harry can sleep through.
What are we here to do? Wait, were you sleeping in your glasses?
I think of these routines as optimized living, like they allow me time to focus on other things. But I've not been doing that.
Hey, Cerebral. And all kinds of things I can do.
I love this painting. and I can't remember the last time I really looked at it.
So you're playing this from the perspective of the person who died? I expected to be playing it from the perspective of the person who survived, but this could be interesting.
This t-shirt is Harry's favorite on me. The same stories I've carried with me for years between houses.
Azumi, I'm not sure what's happening there. Sorry. Hey there, Calvin. I think it's possible, Azumi, for you to get beyond a limit on the number of characters you can have, or something like that in the world, or maybe that would cause a hero mission not to spawn, but I'm not sure.
These daily things, they're good, but weigh us down too. I've got to a good place in life, but I feel like I'm not taking it further.
It's interesting to hear other people who are really different from me describing their problems, because, I mean, I've got,
Even here I get into patterns. Bathroom first, then kitchen for breakfast. Maybe I should change that.
It seems like this guy's main problem is this feeling of his life sort of sinking into a rut, and I can definitely sympathize with that. But I don't know. There's a lot more people that live in my house, and so there's more potential for different crazy things to happen every day.
Was that the first domino to fall to change the future? Dun dun dun.
In my particular situation, I kind of wish that I could get the routine working as smoothly as it seems to work in this couple's life.
Tea.
Oh yeah, Cerebral. We're not going to have a Presence at E3 this year, but
takes the lead, Grandma would tell me. I guess I need to step up to the line. I've got a great thing here.
But our boss, Jeff Strain, is still going down, to LA for meetings and stuff. And so while he was down there, he wanted to have lunch with State of Decay fans. So I think Sonya set something up for him. So I think from what you're saying about the tweet, I think it sounds like they've got that done.
She's a good woman at heart. Old-fashioned, but still. She's right. A man steps up to challenges. I'll ask Harry to marry me. Husband and husband for the rest of our lives. Will Grandma come to the wedding? I think she will. Maybe.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I never had to ask about my wedding. We went pretty traditional for our culture, and didn't have to face the question of if family members would.
Of course, as Will's grandmother, I knew him since he was born. I visited him in hospital on that first day. I still remember the day that James, that's Will's father, handed my grandson to me. He was such a handsome boy from that first moment. Back in the 1980s, James was running 3 pubs in London. He was quite into that punk thing and looked a terrible state to me. I would babysit Will as often as I could to make sure he had someone normal in his life.
I'm not sure how I'd feel if that was my mom's opinion of watching my kids.
Will had to play by himself a lot. Sharon had complications at the birth, so he was never going to have brothers or sisters. There was always music playing when I got to the house. Some awful racket. Not the sort of thing a child should be hearing. I always turned it off.
Or I had the weird disembodied presence in the house turn it off for me.
Sharon Will's mother, met my James when he was working in London. She's American. They broke up for 3 years, and she took Will to America with her.
Man, that's what messes a kid up.
I always thought Will should play outside more. He preferred making up stories, even back then.
Cerebral, you can always tweet to @UndeadLabs about it, asking. If you missed it, you probably missed it. But still, I'm sure Sonia could answer any questions you had.
The magazines that Sharon read were full of paintings. I'm not sure they were very suitable for a young boy to be around, but I don't like to judge.
Sounds like you do like to judge. You just
James had horror books in the
approve of
house,
it.
and I'm so glad they were kept on a high shelf away from Will. Terrible things. I just don't understand what pleasure there is in that kind of story. I only wanted the best for Will. I must sound like I was terribly damning of James and Sharon.
Yep.
But I loved Will as a boy and wanted to give him the best chance of a normal life.
That's interesting. So it seems like this game is about just getting a lot of different angles on this character, from his own perspective, but other people's perspectives, seeing how people felt about him, and then just how that ties into him being gone.
I remember that night because Will had been unusually quiet all evening. He'd got into a fight at school. A boy had been calling a dark-skinned girl names. Will told the boy to stop, and he was punched in the stomach.
Oh, I used to
I
have this
asked
toy.
him if he had cried, and he said yes. I told him that big boys don't cry. I remember him asking me then, what do big boys do when they're sad? When he was grown up, I told him he would be a good man. He would be able to stand up to others. Even though he was hurt, I told him he was right to try to stop the bully. Now I think about this, he didn't seem much happier. What should I have said?
So I suspect that the present day of this story is probably fairly modern, but looks like this is in the kid's youth when, this might have been 70s or 80s. I think she said that his dad was into punk. So probably he grew up in the 80s, like me, probably about my
Will
age.
tripped on a toy when he was going to bed.
And then he just lay there.
I remember carrying him. He was trying so hard not to cry. He was so small in my arms. I've never forgotten that feeling.
Where do I go? Oh. Yeah, you can appreciate when people do sort of go for mannequin
I have
faces.
so many little memories making up our lives together. It's odd what sticks with you, though.
I mean, when you're trying to convey emotion, you can either do amazing human faces, like like a Naughty Dog approach, where you just pour tons and tons and tons of effort into getting the faces exactly right, or if you don't have that kind of money and that kind of time, then it a lot of times, because of the uncanny valley, it's better to explicitly go for a lot less. Just go for a minimalist thing. Let the dialogue and the story carry the emotion, and not try to do faces, because you can, if you try to do faces that are very expressive and realistic, but you can't actually spend the time to nail it, you're just going to end up undermining everything that you're doing.
I took him to bed to read him a story.
This is a good move.
He went through a phase of being scared of ghosts. Sharon would buy him ghost storybooks. And he had that pop-up haunted house book too. I made sure he could see me looking carefully. I always had to check the room for ghosts before he was settled down.
See, if I were scared of ghosts as a kid, I don't think this would work, because ghosts can go through things. They don't have to be under stuff. It's monsters you gotta check for.
I remember that night because I promised him then that I would always be there for him, to protect him regardless of anything. He probably thought I meant about ghosts, but I meant it for everything. It's not the kind of promise you forget. I was reading Grimm's fairy tales to him. I like those much more than the new versions that they kept on coming out with back then. That night was a strange story called The Ungrateful Son.
Oh yeah, Zarnathium. The blanket over the head trick I used when I used to have night terrors as a kid. As long as I covered my ears and my neck and felt sealed under my sheet, I was completely safe, which I knew was completely irrational. I'm like, if this is all it takes, I should also be able to just ignore it. But I couldn't. I had to do that.
I'll tell it to you. It's only short. Once upon a time, a man and his wife were eating a roast chicken for dinner. When the man saw his father, who was very old, walking up the road towards them, the man didn't want to share his chicken, so he hid it out of sight. The man's father arrived, bid them good day, and continued on his way. The man was happy with himself, told his wife to get the chicken and put it on the table again. But the chicken had transformed into a giant toad,
What?
which leapt onto the face of the man. The toad would never leave, and when his wife wanted to help, she was so afraid of it that she dared not go near. The man had to feed the toad every day from then on, or it would bite his face, and he never rested for the remainder of his life. That was a very strange story.
Yeah. Hey, Ivuki. This is not a speedrunner-friendly game.
Will was asleep
Quite the
before
opposite.
I finished it, which was probably a good thing.
Yeah, Drac asked, was that story supposed to put the kid to sleep? Seems like it would make him a little bit more worried. What can I interact with here? Looking for a red or yellow highlight. I guess blue when I'm not pointing at it. Oh, here we go. Interesting. The game is basically, it's kind of a little bit of a pixel hunt sometimes. There's only ever one thing or set of things to do at a given time. This soundtrack is really nice and relaxing. Kind of reminds me
I
of
felt
Ori,
strange
actually.
after reading doing it. I wondered about whether I really could keep him safe. The world is so unpredictable. I would do my best like all good grandmothers. I could still see him sleeping there now, like it was only yesterday.
I guess what I had in mind, Ivuki, is the fact that there's not really much variance to the order of events in this game. I mean, the difference between a fast playthrough and a slow playthrough is pretty minor and time-consuming. So, I imagine it's not really conducive to it. There's not a lot of skill involved, but that's fine. This is obviously not meant to be that kind of game.
I'd raised James, so I thought I would be ready for anything from my grandson Will. But I wasn't daft enough to think that it would be easy.
Oh yeah, every kid is completely different.
So fast.
These his friends?
I remember the family visiting me when Will was a teenager.
Oh, this is his parents?
My husband Robert died when Will was young. He was a good writer, but I do wish he had tried a bit harder. Still, I loved him. I started a small collection of glass animals many years ago. I would buy a new one whenever I went to Brighton. It's good to get out of the house, enjoy the fresh sea air. Do you know Al Martino's Here in My Heart? He had such a lovely voice. It was playing when Robert first kissed me.
So far, Prophecy, the game
Robert would hum it to me sometimes.
It isn't depressing. It's slow paced. It's sort of comfortably getting you into the life and history of this character. You're aware now that he's died, but no one's really talking about that yet. It's not. It's kind of taking its time to get
over
there.
In New Zealand. I went to visit them after James had grown up. We still write letters to each other at Christmas, It's important to stay in touch with your family, even when we're so spread out. It was only a matter of time back then before Diana divorced Charles. She'd done that interview, and we all knew it was coming.
So interesting to me how, now and then you'll listen, you'll watch movies or something like that, from the UK or Europe, and they'll talk about, the death of Princess Diana as being this major sort of milestone event in their lives, and it was a lot less so for me.
Sometimes people treat us old people like we have nothing to say, so I started the conversation. I see that Diana is in the news again. It seems like she's never out of it these days. It's about time she stopped keeping everyone waiting.
I think it's sad. She was bullied into all of this from the beginning.
The rest of the conversation didn't go well. Will frustrated me so much. Sharon sat there, not saying anything, which was worse than her joining in. But I could imagine her American take on the whole thing. James took Will's side on it all. He always would be difficult in those kinds of things. I wish I'd never even started the conversation. They didn't want to hear my opinion. "Excuse me, I'm going to make some tea," I said. No one offered to help.
Ivuki, I was not streaming yet when I played the Stanley Parable, so I don't have a video of my playthrough of it. Definitely a very different kind of game, though. They're both kind of walking simulators, but this is much more of a kind of a emotional character profile, kind of a little bit of a distant dry emotional character profile, whereas Stanley Parable is more of a kind of a postmodern game deconstruction. Very different atmosphere and purpose to them both.
I didn't really want tea. I don't think they wanted it either. But I needed to do something. I suppose all this seems like a strange thing to remember. But it was a sad day for me. James and Sharon were both adults. But Will... I didn't have any choice in my time. But I had a quiet life. It was good enough. These days it's easier to be different, to forge your own path or something like that, and everyone else be damned. I wish Will understood that you've got to fit in to get along in life.
Ivuki, I don't think I saw every possible thing there was to see in the Stanley Parable, but I played through it enough to get sort of the different routes and the different endings. You can see at the point of the game.
He had all these views about things, and it was dangerous. I was so scared that Will was going to go off half-cocked and make a mess of his life.
Cerebral, I thought I'd check this out because, I don't know, I like to sort of play games that are on the fringes, that are trying weird things that games don't usually try, just because it gives me a sense of where the boundaries are. There are a few areas where, at our studio, we're attempting to push some of the boundaries, and so I feel like I've got to be, playing games that are kind of out on the edges, particularly when it comes to, emotion, characterization, different strategies for storytelling. This approach is very different from, I think, what we would do in one of our games, but it's good to know what it is and that it's here.
I stood there, waiting for the tea to brew.
So, Ivuki, this is actually the second segment. The first segment was from his perspective. Now we're looking at his grandmother's perspective on his life as a child and a young man.
And I found myself crying, standing in the kitchen like a silly old what's-it. He was going to go off with views like that and get in trouble, and I couldn't do a thing.
I think the term is wazak. Well,
I knew something had been broken that day between Will and I.
because they disagreed about Princess Diana?
I took a deep breath and pulled myself together.
Oh, are we getting audio crackling again? Sorry about that, guys.
It's not the dumb thing to let others see you get upset.
I'm going to briefly turn the microphone off and see if that makes a difference. Oh, I think I'm seeing crackling in the audio.
Robert passed away soon
Feedback
after
thing
Will was
here.
born. I've lived alone since then. It felt tolerable being by myself until that new distance. It's a terrible thing to feel detached from your own family. I know I'm from a different generation with different values, but I don't think they're all wrong.
Okay, some folks are saying that the crackling stopped. I'm hoping that it stopped for everyone and that we're right.
I wasn't prepared to accept that Will wasn't going to talk to me anymore. His views, I felt he was putting his future at risk.
Yeah, see, and that's something, an attitude I don't understand. Why someone would think that. I mean, obviously, typically, like conservative and liberal views will divide themselves pretty evenly across the country, just because they're sort of playing a tug of war, and they'll shift their positions to get more people, more voters on their side. So, I mean, if someone disagrees with you, chances are they've got a lot of people on their side who are doing just fine. So I mean, unless he decided to be something crazy, like, a libertarian or something. I'm just kidding. Sorry.
All these free ideas about people choosing their own way to live. He would understand later. But how much later? What damage might he do to his life before he saw that you need to fit in to get along?
Thanks, Prophecy. Holy crap, we're taking a long
I
time
felt
decorating this
uneasy
house
about
with this
that
grandmother.
Christmas. We would be together.
Thank you all for your
day.
patience. I realize this game is really slow paced and not the typical thing I usually spend time on. I think
It's a lot of work
we'll get through this
making your house
scene
look welcoming, but
and
was
then we
good
might
to
call it
visit.
quits. I think I've got a sense of the kind of game this is, learned something about it, and that's why I was mostly here. For a second I kind of thought these guys were Jewish,
I remember a Christmas after Will had gone to university,
but nope.
but we were all coming back together for the holiday.
Yeah, Zarnathium, early in Donald Trump's run, I think you could say it was easier to say disparaging things about people who listen
It's
to him.
important to keep in touch with your friends.
Now that he's the only
We didn't have
conservative
the
option,
internet back then. I wish people still wrote letters.
I've seen a lot of my friends who were conservative but fairly reasonable, talking themselves into voting for him as the lesser of two evils. Because Democrats, have managed to put up one of the few people that are, one of the very few people that can really mobilize Republicans against them. I think a lot of Republicans feel like they're sort of between a rock and a hard place, and they're going to end up supporting Donald Trump, mostly just because they feel like it's their responsibility being on that side of the aisle. So it's tough to, you never quite know why somebody believes something, why somebody goes a certain way. It's a good idea to reserve judgment. Unlike this grandmother who thinks she knows everything about this kid and how he should feel and how he should live.
Will was bringing a girlfriend, Sarah. I wanted the place to look perfect.
Cerebral's waiting for the grandmother melee combat tutorial, which... so, yeah, probably not coming, but appreciate that.
My family arrived just as the Christmas lunch was ready. It was perfect timing. I was very worried about seeing Will. I wanted him to understand that when we disagreed, I didn't mean anything against him personally. I just wanted to keep him safe. Did I tell you that Sharon and James split up for 3 years once? Will spent the time in America with her family. It was hard for me not seeing him. He was 10 and, like most boys, he wasn't interested in writing many letters. Sarah was lovely, of course. She was a bit shy back then, I think. We talked about her university courses. She really had no reason to be nervous. James is like my husband Robert. Kind at heart, but I wish he would apply himself.
Oh, I just got a text from my sister who says, so I happened to watch your Hatful Boyfriend stream you did a few weeks ago, and then I saw last week that it was released for iPhone, so I've now spent a stupid amount of time playing through the entire game. It's the weirdest thing ever, and I loved it, so thanks for indirectly introducing me to it. My sister's a big fan of anime and all things Japanese, and so I think she probably really would have gotten into the way that game jumps straight into a lot of the tropes of Japanese visual novels and then just turns them all on their heads. So that's good to hear.
Will was a perfect gentleman.
It is interesting seeing some of these, family disagreements and different perspectives reflected in a culture that's not mine. You know, I mean, I know how Americans talk about these things, but I imagine the conversation is just a little bit different in England. You know, I think there's a bit more of respect for tradition and stuff. I get, at least that's the impression that I'm getting. A sense that, I mean, there's just simply a deeper well of history and culture to draw from in England than there is in the United States, at least among you know,
He had
folks
such
of European
fine
descent.
manners. Thanks.
Man, this is like a really long scene. It's mostly about creating food. I don't know if I'm gonna make it all the way through. I don't know if I'm gonna. You guys want me to get through Christmas? Oh, they ate all the bangers and mash. Eating all the bread. I don't know what that is. Probably has some posh English name. Come on. Okay. Missing that. And that. Finding all the food to eat is a challenge. Hey, Will, what are you going to say?
I'm so proud of Will. He was becoming the man I had hoped he would be.
Well, because he brought a girl home?
Sarah seemed like such a lovely match for him. He would have a happy, normal life.
So I can see the point of this section, you know, it's all about his grandmother's...
Was the last time I saw her.
His grandmother's hopes that he would sort of turn out like someone from her generation, and you've got the knowledge. I mean, you know that he's gay, and you know that that he died right before proposing to his boyfriend, and so you get the sense that she's barreling towards a sense of disappointment in him, but you end up, as the audience member, I think you're meant to feel more sympathy for him, because you know he's barreling towards a conflict with her, but then she ends up with him dying and maybe not having a lot of resolution to their conflict. So yeah, so this is an interesting game. I mean, you're definitely it's slow paced. It's letting you spend time with each character and their perspective.
The next summer, I went to visit Will at university.
The thing that I feel like it's missing, though, is, you know, Gone Home told a very similar story. It wasn't specifically about death, but it was about unraveling someone's personal feelings in their life, their conflicts with their family members, things like that. But it also had this sense of tension as you're going through it. Like, especially early on, I was actually waiting for jump scares and stuff like that around corners, because you were in this dark, stormy house and you didn't know, you know, and there was that question of, you in this game, it shows you that Will dies up front, or at least it shows you that he's in a serious accident. I don't know if maybe he's not dead. Maybe there's a surprise at the end. I assumed that he died, though, and it tells you that up front. And I don't feel like there's a lot of tension pulling me forward. I feel like, you know, a lot of the story that I'm being told. I mean, this disagreement between him and his grandmother is a pretty common one. You know, I mean, it's a story that we've heard a lot before. And there's nothing, it doesn't seem like there's anything very new and surprising in it. And there's certainly, I'm not getting a sense that I should expect something new and surprising. And so it does feel like I'm kind of going through the story by rote, rather than being led forward by a sense of questioning and suspense, the way I was with Gone Home. So whereas, you know, with this game, I am getting impatient, and I'm like feeling like I want to move on to something else. With Gone Home, I was pulled all the way through. And really, really wanted to find out what was going to happen. And I was really, you know, by the end of it, like, you know, it has a pretty interesting, satisfying ending that filled me with tension, you know, and that's hard to do in a game that's essentially kind of what they call a walking simulator, right? Yeah. So anyway, I think I'm going to quit here. But thank you all for sticking with me through this, because, you know, a lot of what I do, you know, on my Twitch channel, it's really about broadening my horizons, seeing what games are out there, and sometimes it's games that I would not normally play for my own entertainment. But I want to, I want to know what's going on, you know, in different parts of the industry regardless. Oh, is the mic freaking out again? Oh, hold on. Let me try doing stuff. Hold on.